Hey, this is Jonah with Gray Area. Welcome to our series Spotlight, where our mission is to build a bigger and more united house music community by sharing exciting festivals, event brands, and artists with you. In this interview, you'll hear from Sly Turner, a rising tech house DJ coming from San Diego. Be sure to like this interview and subscribe for more like this. Just want to welcome you to the channel here on Gray Area. Today we're joined by Sly Turner. Really love your music, man. You've actually been doing it for a little while. Really great. You're from a cool city, so just want to get into it. Just for yourself, kind of what we do here is try and find and highlight artists like yourself, up and comers who we think have cool sounds, are associated with great event brands or labels, and just try and give you a profile and, help you build yourself in the US, with our platform and do as much as we can on our, and obviously give you the opportunity to kind of share your story and tell us what you're about and what your music's about.
Yeah, so definitely. Thanks.
One of the first things I just kind of ask everybody is if you have a moment in time, whether it was 4 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it is, where you kind of felt like you fell in dance music.
I can't really point to one particular time. I know a lot of people have like a moment, where they're like, oh, now I know I love dance music. I would say that it kind of happened when I was 19. I moved to San Diego back from Santa Barbara. I was living here before, moved to Santa Barbara, came back. And when I came back, that's kind of when I started diving into it, a bit deeper, kind of immersing myself in it, going to local parties, at Spin, Bang Bang, like a warehouse somewhere in the area, and really focusing on production a lot more than I had in the past, where before it was kind of like a hobby, and then, I wanted to take it a bit seriously. So there wasn't really one moment, I would say, but definitely during that time span.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned it. I wanted to kind of ask you about San Diego. It's a city that for electronic music, most people probably, it wouldn't be the first place that they think of in terms of, a place that has a great scene, but it has a really vibrant scene. I was actually lucky enough to go to Lost Festival last March, like right before the entire world shut down, which in hindsight was like really crazy. I'm just wondering if you could kind of tell us a little bit about the scene in San Diego and some of your favorite places.
Definitely. Yeah, that Crossed was the last event that I went to too before before everything shut down. We were like at Patrick Topping, just like going crazy, and then the next thing, like the world ended the next day. So, yeah, I would say the scene has gotten a lot bigger down here. Before, I would say when I first started, house wasn't really too popular down here. I mean, you could find it a couple nights a week, downtown, places like Bang Bang or like, the AC Lounge was like a popular spot back then. Spin, of course, but now it's definitely grown. I would say in the past like 3 years, 2 or 3 years, there's a lot more people that are getting exposed to, house and tech house down here where, maybe they weren't really big listeners of it before. So it's good. It's definitely growing. My favorite place down here is Spin. That place is basically my second home. It's an old town down here. But yeah, everybody there's great. Shane, the guy that handles the audio, he's amazing. Brando, the manager, is awesome guy. Brandon, other manager, is a great guy. They do a really good job there. So, yeah, if you're in the area, go check it out.
Absolutely. No, and I would highly recommend that anyone who gets the opportunity to or can go to Crossed, because it was a really amazing fest, like awesome location. And if I'm sure you've seen obviously their lineup for the fall, and it's impeccable. Just last one was. I'm wondering, just growing up as a kid, what kind of music were you listening to, or what kind of music was your playing in the house?
So my dad was really into Prince and like funk and disco. So I listened to a lot of that growing up. My mom listened to like alternative stuff, like Stone Temple Pilots, like Green Day, um, like Pearl Jam, stuff like that. Then when I was a kid, I listened to a lot of like electronic bands. So there's this one local band. I grew up in Sacramento, and they're partly from Sacramento, partly from Berkeley. They're called Out Hut. Uh, but yeah, they're really crazy band, like electronic, psychedelic, poppy at times. Uh, but yeah, it's a really cool band. I was listening to a lot of that stuff. More popular stuff too, like Rat-a-Tat, I guess, was like the first kind of electronic stuff I listened to. Uh, New Young Pony Club, kind of poppier, you know, electronic bands. And then, of course, rap and hip hop.
Dude, the Rat-a-Tat, that took me back. I haven't heard that name in a long time, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember like that was one of those. I think that was definitely one of those groups that I was listening to back in the day where it helped. Like it was a bit of that transition from like everything else into moving into listening to like more electronic focused music. Um, as
Right.
you just sent over. We asked you some questions before the interview, and you mentioned you started DJing kind of when you were around 20 or so. I'm just wondering if you remember the first time that you DJ'd in like any setting outside of your bedroom, whether it was at a club or just for your friends, and kind of what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. So the first time I DJ'd was at this desert festival. Uh, I think it was called Good Vibe Tribe Gathering, something like that. Something way out like in the Mojave Desert. Like 3-4 hours north of San Diego. Just hell of a time getting out there. If you bring in like a sedan out there, you're guaranteed to get stuck. Uh, but yeah, that was the first time I played. Shitty slot time. Brought my own controller because I didn't know how to play on CDJs yet. Uh, my computer, I actually left it outside, and my laptop got wet because it got really cold at night, and I forgot. I fell asleep and forgot to get it. Uh, and it wouldn't turn on like 8 hours before my set that morning. So then I had to like dry it out in the sun and then see if it would work later. And like luckily it did, but I had to force myself to learn how to use CDJs after that.
Oh my god, that's a great story. It's funny, the CDJ thing I think can be kind of barrier to entry for a lot of people because it's obviously like not necessarily the most accessible setup for just a DJ because of the price. But like if you want to make it as a DJ, it's not an option. I'm just curious, like how did you learn, and did you have a place to go, or what was that for you? Kind of teaching yourself that.
So the second time I DJ'd was at another desert thing, and uh, they had CDJs there, and the dude who played before me was like this 35, 40-year-old dude. He's been playing forever, like 20 years or so. And he's like, oh, because he noticed I had a controller, and he's like, oh, are you not playing on the CDJs? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to use my controller, like all scared. And he's like, well, do you have a flash drive? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, go put that thing away. Like, I'll just teach you right now. And then he kind of like taught me on the fly. So yeah, interesting process there. Then after that, my friend Britton Gallant, he makes techno, lives down here too. I would go over to his house and he would teach me.
That's awesome. Wow. That first experience. Good. Shout out to the veteran who decided to take you under his wing right there. That's really nice. He definitely didn't have to do that. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who wouldn't do that, but that's awesome. I'm curious, outside of San Diego, where obviously, you play a lot, are there any festivals or venues or just kind of bucket list for you that you'd love to play at?
Um, Fabric, for sure. It's definitely on there. I have never been to Fabric either, because last time I went to London, I was 17 or 18, and I haven't been back since. Um, but yeah, that's definitely one of them. I would love to play at Space in Miami, of course. And then the Avant Gardner in New York.
Awesome. I'm in New York City right now. That's where I'm based, and I also work as a talent buyer. So we do a lot of stuff there, and hopefully we'll have you out one day, man. It's a special place. It's been cool. It's been very surreal, kind of reopening and being back in that venue. And you're just like, I'm at this outdoor venue with 5,000 people, and like 2 months ago, I was wearing my mask at the grocery store. Uh, was something else I'd just love to ask everybody, and it's can be a hard question, but if you had the opportunity to kind of decide the billing at a club of your choosing, and you get to pick anyone on the lineup with you, what would that look like? And you can say as many names as you want.
Are they just anybody, or are they DJs?
What I like anyone. I've actually only had people give D, but if you have other names, feel free. Just someone you'd love to share the stage with.
Okay. So, all right, I'll pick a band and then a DJ too. So, if it was a band, it would be Hiatus Coyote. I've been listening to a lot of their stuff right now, and it's like some of the best music I've heard in a long time. So that would definitely be a cool thing to experience. And then if I had to share the stage with somebody who DJs as well, I would probably say Enzo Siragusa.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Enzo. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you first, at least officially, I think a track in 2016, and you've been releasing music ever since then. Something that I think is important for aspiring DJs to kind of understand when you see that first track out, like that's not the beginning of the process. As I'm sure obviously it's like there was a lot of build up to that point. You didn't just sit down in 2016 and make a track and release it on Spotify. I'm wondering if you can just touch on kind of the years before that point, and what it was like for you, just kind of what the work was like, learning how to produce and scrapping together DJ gigs and whatever it took to get to a place where you were comfortable releasing music.
Yeah, at first, it was just a lot of trial and error and watching YouTube videos, basically, kind of how anybody learns, Yeah, I would just spend hours watching YouTube videos on anything, like compression, mixing techniques, sound design, and then just try to implement those things in my production. And at first, I wasn't making house. I made a lot of hip hop at first. And then, I don't know, I just kept doing it, and kept learning, because obviously you want to get better and make the best music possible. So even when I was releasing stuff back then, if we listen to it now, it's probably pretty trash in terms of the quality of the mix and stuff. But yeah, at the time you think it sounds great because your ears are fresh and, you're not used to hearing the right, frequencies and, leveling volume and stupid things like that. But yeah, I would say I completely forgot what the question was at first.
No, you answered. I mean, I think I answered. Yeah, right? Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just asking about, kind of the process of leading first releases.
Right. Okay. And yeah. So, I didn't really know what I was doing back then in terms of releasing stuff, right? It was just like, if there was a label that I liked and they had a demo drop, I would just blast it away, But yeah, like I said, they were probably mixed pretty poorly. But that's kind of stuff you learn as you go along. I guess if I was going to redo it now, I would have waited a bit until, my tracks were a bit, higher quality before I started putting them out there. But, when you're young and you're starting, you're just eager to put music out, just get it out there. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like a lot of people I talk to kind of share that sentiment where they're like, don't even ask me about the first track I released. Like it's garbage and whatever. And something like mixing and mastering a track is something that, doesn't produce music wouldn't really think about as part of the process. And I know any of my friends who make music, if I try and show them a song, like they're not going to be, yeah, I love the drop. It's like, I don't know if that EQ is balanced well enough, dude. And I'm just like, all right, well, that's the mind of a music producer. I'm wondering as you've kind of honed in on your sound and obviously, gotten better and more skilled, are there any plugins or synths or hardwares that you kind of gravitate towards and really love to use?
Definitely. There's these plugins by Yuhi called Ace and Basil, and they kind of emulate modular synthesis. Um, and there's like little parameters that you can tweak. They have like little patches, like digital patches that you can move around uh, to emulate modular sound. So those two, I think,
Mm-hmm.
are I use those in every single track. Uh, I also really love the API stuff from Waves, or I'm sorry, from SPL, uh, for like EQing and compression, for like drum processing. Those are really good. Uh, yeah, I would say those are probably my go-tos, my recommendations.
Well, as you mentioned, like, you felt like you maybe wished you waited longer to put music out, until you kind of stepped it up a little. But in 2017, I don't know what number release it was for you, but obviously still relatively on. You signed a track with Box of Cats, which is, great label, run by like Kyle Watson and Wango, and I think there's some others. But I'm just for you, if you could just kind of touch on, what it meant to kind of have that recognition from an artist-driven label, and did it feel validating for what you're doing, or more of a feeling of like, okay, now I'm really like, that was the first step, and now I can really get started?
I mean, yeah, at the time I was, super excited. Uh, it was something that I was trying to do for a while. That took a few tries. Uh, because, like you said, it's owned by like five different guys. Jeff, um, Tom, Wonko, Kyle, and God, who am I missing? Mark Spence. Um, so yeah, at the time I was super stoked because I was really into that kind of like fidgety, bassy sound back then. And then I guess as I just kept listening to house music more and more and dance music more and more, I kind of grew out of it. Went into tech house a bit more, and then into like minimal. So that's kind of where I'm at now, somewhere in between there, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, I still love those guys. Still support the label and everything. Um, they kind of gave me one of my first opportunities. So yeah, it was exciting at the time, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, piggybacking off that, and I'm glad you mentioned it because, your sound now is as you said, it's definitely not, kind of in what the Box of Cats world is. And I don't know when exactly that change happened for you, but I think in 2019 you put out stuff with Desert Hearts, and I would say that, you're definitely a little more in that lane now, and you've had a lot of association with them, whether it's releasing music, hitting on their live streams. I don't know if there's been any shows because obviously, you know, the whole world is a disaster. Hopefully one day. I'm wondering if you could just tell us how you connected with the Hearts crew and just kind of what their vibe is and what that whole atmosphere that attracts them.
Yeah, so they're locally based from San Diego. Uh, so I would always go to the shows, listen to the music when they would release it. And being from San Diego, it was pretty important to me to try to get on the label. Um, and then once that happened, all the other guys you'd see them around town all the time at all the shows. Porky especially. Um, so yeah, me and Porky started hanging out more. We'd run into each other more. And through the years, it's just kind of more like a friendship now. Less of an association, I would say. But yeah, they're all great guys. Porky's the one I would say I see the most. Lee obviously moved away recently, but he was definitely an active member, in the community when he was down here. We all miss him.
So yeah, they're really great, and I mean, I think their impact on the West Coast is pretty big, and they are slowly breaking in here on the East Coast. I know we have they're doing like a stage takeover at Elro next weekend here in New York, so we're very excited to see that. Kind of the next thing I wanted to touch on is just listening through your music. I noticed that you often are collaborating with other people. Whether it was like Shuxi, who was on a lot of your tracks, or recently you did this EP with Wyatt Marshall. I'm just wondering, for you, just from like a work process perspective, how different is it, you're collaborating with somebody versus working on your own on music?
Yeah, it's pretty different actually. I mean, it's not so different when it's in person, but like for the tracks with Wyatt, for example, we're just sending them back and forth, like via Dropbox. So, in that sense, it's kind of like, hey, I started the track. Here's an 8-bar loop. I'm gonna send it over to you. You kind of fill it out, bring the arrangement out, send it back. I'll make some tweaks, send it back, make some tweaks, and then by the third or fourth time around, it's basically done. Uh, and it would kind of just go both ways. Like I would start one track, he would start another track, and then we'd flip and send them to each other, and then we finish them. So it's like as long as you designate, I guess, not complete responsibility, but just little parts of responsibility. Like okay, you start it, I finish it, blah blah blah. Then it's easy to do. Uh, it's honestly probably a little bit easier than doing it in person with somebody because you're not sitting there bickering back and forth. You're literally just working by yourself and then sending it, and then they work on it by themselves. So, yeah, I would say it doesn't really get in my head at all. I don't really get like, I don't get turned off by it, by the task of collabing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the way you're describing it, it's almost like a back-to-back DJ set, just like you're doing this push-pull thing. Your last EP, the Functional, I noticed it kind of had a little bit more of an upbeat, funky sound to it. I was just wondering, like, is this an intentional new direction for you, or what was inspiring you to kind of go into the studio and that?
Yeah, so I actually made those tracks like almost like a year and a half ago, I would say. So I was kind of like when I first was listening to minimal and like being exposed to minimal, and I like Disclosure a lot growing up too. So like I'm kind of a sucker for chords sometimes, even though nowadays I kind of tend to go the opposite way. I don't know. I've been jumping around all over the place a lot recently, but I'm trying to narrow it down and focus on not a specific genre, but I guess like a specific sound, that you can kind of recognize. But yeah, that's the thing is I get, a lot of different ideas, and the tracks can sound really different. But to me, that's not a big deal. I just, it sounds cliche. I just make whatever I feel like making at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to be more conscious about it and narrow it down a bit more these days.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting. Like anytime I ask a question like that, and it can be that kind of response because it's like you're in the studio just trying to do what you want to do. You're probably not thinking about it, but from an outside perspective, it's so easy to look at music and be like, "Oh, what was the decision behind going in this direction?" I'm gonna let you go in a minute here, but the last question I just want to ask is just kind of what's next for you. what's coming out music wise, and if there are any shows you have booked that you're excited about and want to share, or just goals for shows and music.
Yeah, so I'm playing at Bang Bang on the 30th down here in San Diego, opening for Carlo Leo. So that'll be a cool one. And then as far as releases go, I have one coming out next month in August on Deep Perfect. Uh, so that'll definitely be a good release for me. It's a collaboration with my buddy Justin Villauer from LA. So yeah, we're really excited about that one. It's a compilation, so there's a lot of other cool artists on it, like Stefano Farini, Aaron D, a few other people. So yeah, should be a good comp.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on early in the morning, man. Really appreciate it. Hopefully you have a great day after this. Don't be too tired at work, and keep up the good work, man. The music you've been putting out recently is awesome, and hopefully we'll see you on the East Coast soon.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. You have a good one.